a special prayer for the song leader.
Yeah, I always pray for this song leader. Well, it's really everybody else is praying for.
Jesus Beatitudes. So I'm excited about this. Always excited when we start a new book. I think everybody's got a book. Yes? And Lisa fell again and is bruised up, no broken bones though. So y'all remember Emmylise Patrick? She had another fall and was kind of banged up, nothing broken, but I'm sure extremely sore from that. I'm sorry to hear that. All right, let's look at the introductory thoughts just for a second. I'm obviously not going to read everything having to do with the Beatitudes throughout this entire book. I encourage you to go home and study it, and we'll discuss it, but we will read some of the things in class. That first paragraph, what's a beatitude? And he said, that's easy. Look for two words in the one. Beatitudes first, there is a word, be. See it? Now, if we address an extra T, or we add an extra T to what is left, we come up with the word attitudes. There it is, the Beatitudes of Jesus are the attitudes we are to be. To study them, to see the potential for good in all of us and the blessings that await any of us who follow his ways. And then the second one says, why did Jesus use Beatitudes? And he says, I'm really not sure, but a little bit later he says, alerting us to the prospect of true joy. I like that. How to truly be happy, how to have real joy. I believe that is the reason why. He is our creator. He knows what's best for us, and sometimes what we think is best and makes us the most happy is not really the right thing, and we find that out the hard way. And so these things look like the opposite of that, of course, as we look at these, that we think, well, these things are not going to make me happy, but yet they actually will when we do them and do them in the right way. He put characteristic or trait of heart, a heart needed for this joy. And then the last paragraph is basically what I stole and put in the bulletin for this book, and that is, where do you find the Beatitudes? And of course we find 8 of them there in Matthew chapter 5, but the other 7 we find throughout the teachings of Jesus. And so our good author Dan has put those in here, and we'll be looking at those. That will be the first time I've studied that. This is a 2025 book, and so I know that you have not studied this book. I know that you've studied the Beatitudes. Everybody has. But I think it's a study that we need to go through from time to time because it's that important, and because if you're anything like me, you forget very quickly. And not only that, but the material that we're looking at is new material, so I'm sure he's going to bring out maybe some aspects and things that maybe we've never thought about before. Everybody has known somebody or people that always talk about themselves. It's all about them. It's about their job. It's about somebody that's done them wrong. It's about their family. It's about their ailments. Whatever it is, it's all about them. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. We all do that some. And there's nothing wrong with that, but have you met people that's all they talk about is self? If you have not, where have you been? And let me go there because people are like that, and I would say people are like that more today than ever before. People are consumed with self. Of course, everybody knows I'm not a huge social media fan. I don't think it's the devil. I think it has its pros and cons. I do use it as well. However, I can tell a huge shift towards what I call meism. Ever since that became something that is very common and popular today because it gives everybody a platform to put what they want to put out there. And if you get a lot of likes and good comments and hearts and all of that, a lot of times that tends, because we're human, it tends to go to people's heads and they start thinking, wow, and maybe I am just that important. Look how many hearts, look how many likes. I've got 1,500 friends on Facebook, and I put this comment out and I had 600 hearts, and it tends to go to people's heads. And so that's one reason I dislike it. Now, in reading some of this material and some other material I have on this, One author likened this kind of attitude, this selfish attitude, to a guy that is in a hot air balloon. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but he's in a hot air balloon. The higher he gets, the smaller everybody looks, right? But the same is true with everybody on the ground. The further up he gets, the smaller he looks to everybody. And so this particular author likened that to someone who is conceited. Now, what we're talking about in this first beatitude is being humble, and of course the opposite of that is being conceited. And so I like that illustration a lot, because that is kind of like the person that is all about me, always talking about me. And so to them, everybody else is smaller than them and less important. But what they don't seem to realize is if they're so consumed with self, everybody else sees them in that same light. Do they not? And so I like to talk to people that I like to hear about people, no doubt about that, but I like to talk to people that also ask about me and my family. You know, that's special. We all like that. Who does not like that? You know, everybody likes that. And so not being too consumed with self. Several passages. The first one that I want to look at this morning is in the book of Proverbs, chapter 29 and verse 23. All of them talking about pride and the issues of that. Proverbs 29:23 says, "One's pride will bring him low, but he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor." And we know that the Lord talked a lot about this as well. This is kind of similar to our last study. We do not have a video segment this time. I hate that, because I really like listening to Dan, but that's okay. Would y'all like me to record a little video segment?
Why not?
You know, have myself in a prison cell or something, or something of that nature. I'm joking, of course. Do what? I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. I would like to be left, also let out, Scott, and I'm afraid that you would leave me in there. Yeah. Give me the true experience, right? This study is similar in the sense that there are study starter questions and study harder type questions. And so the study starter questions obviously are to get us started with our study, to get our mind on whatever it is that we're talking about here, obviously humility. And we won't always look at all of these. For instance, I did not love the second study starter question myself. I think it's very common knowledge, so we might not even look at that one. But let's look at number one in your book. Study starter question number one says, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Let's go back towards the beginning. In your opinion, did Eve disobey God because she listened to A, Satan, or B, herself, or C, both? Think about that.
No.
All right, we've got both. Anybody else? Anybody differ on opinion?
Well, you can't be wrong, because they...
All right, but so you say both, but why do you say both?
I think she was tempted. Satan tempted her, no doubt, and answered those things. She used three methods: the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life.
She used the three methods?
Yes.
Yeah.
So she came about it in the typical way that sin comes about, I guess, or
Right.
temptation. Okay. Anybody else? Well, this is how I look at it. I look at it as she had a desire, and that desire was not a good desire, but it doesn't become sin until you act on it, right?
Right.
Okay, and so how did Satan play a role in that? Satan has a way to come to us and to make that desire look very, very appealing. And so that's exactly, what was her desire?
She wanted to eat of the tree.
God for one.
Yeah, so to be wise, to be just like God.
Yeah.
And so would you say pride?
Yes.
Yeah.
But she looked at fruit and saw that it was good. It looked good. So.
That don't matter. We're not going to go there. I mean, the original thing there is her desire was to be like God.
Yes.
But there was nothing wrong with that desire in and of itself until she acted on it. That's where Satan came in and he's tempting her to do that. He's trying to look at all the pros, if you will, none of the cons, but all the pros to, if you do this, you're going to be like God, knowing good from evil. And that's how Satan uses us today. He takes these things, these urges that we have, and sometimes we don't act on, and he encourages us to do that. And that's how pride comes about. Let's skip number 2. Pride is destructive. It goes back to the very beginning. That is the original sin, is it not?
Yep.
So it goes back to the very beginning of time. That's what we just talked about there in the Garden of Eden. The very first sin that was committed had to do with pride. What about before that? Does anything go back before the very beginning of time?
Well, not before, but even go back to Cain and Abel.
No, that's the beginning of time once
Gods.
again. Yes. And so you have in Isaiah chapter 14, in detail there is how he is described, the angel of Satan, the dragon of old, if you will. There in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28. We're not going to go there and read that, but if you have not read that, jot it down in your notes and look at that. It's a very, very good description of Satan and the reason why, of course, that he was cast out of heaven. And in fact, Jesus talks about that in Luke chapter 10, that was the reason why he was thrown out of heaven. And so pride is not only your original sin, going back to the very beginning of time, it's really your original sin because it goes back before time actually began. And when you look at the beginning, so the very before time began and then the very beginning of time, but then you look at a third thing, the beginning of the Lord's church. That was one of the very first sins, if not the very first sin, I think, in the Lord's church also is pride. And so you see a lot of writings about that in especially Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and 1 Corinthians chapter 1 as well. He talks about that being an issue because you remember the arguments there of who baptized who? And I was baptized by Paul, and I was baptized by Apollos, and all of that. You had a lot of pride playing, roles there as well. And so it's always been an issue in the Lord's church. 1 Corinthians 1, verses 11 through 13 is a good passage. We won't look at that, but it has to do with that particular situation. A couple more passages coming from the book of Proverbs about pride. Proverbs 29 and verse 23. We'll go over some things that are in your book, but these are extras, so you can just jot them down in your book. Proverbs 29:23 says, one's pride, Solomon wrote, will bring him low. Does that sound familiar from a New Testament passage? In James?
God exalts the pride, resists the pride and gives grace to the humble.
Right, James 4 and verse 6. So Solomon said, one's pride will bring him low, but he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. And so let somebody else humble you. One of the things James talks about is coming in maybe to an assembly, and instead of wanting the best seat and everything, why don't you be humble and you assume the lowest spot, and if anything, if somebody wants to bring you up, then that will make you feel good about yourself. But don't do that to yourself. Don't automatically come in and think and assume I'm number one. Or you might not be thinking that, but you're thinking, well, I'm not as bad as this person or that person. I don't have the issues of this person or that person. And so you're automatically exalting yourself without even realizing it. And you're saying, you have an humble spirit. Put others, Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, put others before yourself. All throughout Scripture, we are admonished over and over and over again to put others' needs before our own, and there's a reason for that, because when we don't do that, we fall prey to what we're talking about here, to being prideful, to being arrogant, to thinking more about ourselves than we should think. Proverbs 3 and verse 34, if you jotting these down, here's another one that talks about it. It says, the humble God gives favor. Do you want the favor of God?
Sure.
Absolutely, I do. And so that's Proverbs 3 and verse 34. The humble God gives favor. Of course, James 4 and verse 6 talks about God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Ephesians 2 verse 8 says we're saved by grace. If I don't have the grace of God, I am lost. Galatians 5 and verse 4 talks about that. And God resists the proud. He gives grace to the humble. Therefore, I need to try my best to be humble in spirit, not think too highly of myself as I should. James 4 and verse 10 says, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. So the idea is let somebody else. James talks about somebody else. You know, in assembly or what in a group of people, let somebody else, you know, lift you up instead of lifting yourself up. Here it's talking about God, James 4 and verse 10. Let God lift you up if you come to him in an humble way. By the way, what is impossible if you come to God in a prideful way that we all need? Grace, salvation. Salvation. You can't be saved if you come to God in a prideful way. You have to realize who you are, how you have fallen short, and how you need the Lord. And all of that is humility. Look at the introduction. Like I said, we're not going to read all of this, but I wanted to read some of it. I like this. I like where he gives a definition of pride here in the introduction. He says, I love the definition of pride that says pride is the glue that gets us stuck on ourselves. I like that. It's that, but it's much more. Pride is sin, Proverbs 21 and verse 4. Pride is something God hates, Proverbs 6, 16 and 17, and a host of other passages that you have there. And pride is something with which most of us struggle at some degree. And I would say that as well. Some a lot more than others, but I think that we all struggle with that. All right, definition for humility. Just going to kind of skip around a little bit here. He talks a little bit there about self-esteem in our material. What do you think about self-esteem? You need a little bit, right? You need a little bit. If you have poor self-esteem, then you do not see your worth. And we need to see our worth. Now, what are two main things that we should find our self-esteem in? Anybody? That are biblical? One of them is the very beginning of the Bible. One of them is the passage there that talks about grace in Ephesians chapter 2. So in the very beginning, it says that we are, Genesis 1:26, created in the image of God. Now, if that doesn't give you some self-esteem and self-worth, what will? I mean, that's amazing to think about being created in the image of God. When it talks about the image of God, I've heard my whole life, you know, that has to do with the fact that we have a soul, a spirit, something that is eternal, and that's a part of it. That's not all of it. By any means, being made in the image of God is that we even have some of the characteristics that God has. And I talked about that years ago in a sermon series, Made in His Image, where we brought out a lot of different things having to do with that. But man, that makes me feel good that I'm made in the image of God. God made all things. Is there anything else that God made that He says that is made in His image? There's not, is there? Everybody loves a baby. There's nothing else that's made in His image but us. Now, what's the second passage that has to do with grace that should give us some self-esteem that is okay to think about, that will make us feel good about ourselves and have some self-worth? Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 says we're saved by the grace of God, saved by the grace through faith. But then verse 10 says what?
We're saved by good works, or He created us for good works.
It does, but I'm looking for right before that in that same verse. We are His workmanship. So I like the translations, and it's New Living Translation, I think, is one of them that says masterpiece. In fact, the New Living Translation might be the only one that says that. I'm not sure. That'd be something to look up. Those of you that have your phones and your pads and stuff, you could look that up, the different translations. I know you've got a good program for that, but I like that better. It's actually rendering the Greek, the original word, more accurately, because we are his masterpiece. We are his crown and joy. We are above every other part of his creation. And so once again, that should put us above everything else. So the one in Genesis chapter 1 has to do with physical. What does Ephesians 2:10 have to do with?
Spiritual.
Has to do with spiritual. So those of us who are children of God, sure enough, should have some self-worth, because we're not only physically created in his image, but spiritually we're created in his image as well.
It does say masterpiece.
The New Living,
Yeah, the New Living Translation does say masterpiece.
I'd looked at that before, and I think that might be the only translation that renders it like that. And I'm not crazy about the New Living Translation, like every aspect of it, but sometimes it actually gets closer than other translations. A lot of times it doesn't. That's good. Do y'all have a good app or something that gives you the different translations and you can compare? I want to encourage you, if you don't have that, that is really, really good, because if you're anything like me, I was brought up in the church, and yes, I had it drilled in my head at a young age that like King James Version, New King James Version was it, and anything else falls short, you know. Wrong, absolutely wrong. And there are some places where the King James, New King James are a better translation, and there are plenty of places where it actually is not. The English Standard Version is an excellent translation of the Bible, and it's easier to read. And the New American Standard, what is that, 1910 or something like that? But anyway, are two very good translations.
New American Standard now is 1975 and 19.
I'm probably thinking of the original then.
Yeah, 95, not 70 is 1995, and then now they have a 2020.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay. It's hard to say new anything and say 1910, right?
I'm kind of like,
The Amplified version says, "For we are his workmanship," but then it puts in a bracket. It says, "His own master work, a work of art."
Right.
Kind of a
Commentary type thing in the verse.
Masterpiece, workmanship. Either way, we are his crown and joy of his creation. Romans chapter 12, verse 3, I say to everyone among you, do not think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. So once again, admonish not to think too highly of ourselves. We're about to get to some questions, and that way we can get into some comments and stuff. I did want to look at the section, and I don't want to read every bit of this myself, and so if you want to volunteer to read, then do that when it comes time. Let's look at the material there where he breaks down the definition of humility in your book, and he breaks down this particular beatitude. I do want to read what he has to say about that. And so the very first, of course, you got the first and last part of the beatitude. The first part, blessed are the poor in spirit. So let's listen to what how he breaks this down. Anybody want to read that paragraph that does that, Scott? Mike's coming your way. Just the first one, and then Henry, he raised his hand. Henry, if you will, you can do that second part there.
okay.
Blessed are the poor in spirit. The Greeks had two main words for poor. One referred to those who squawked out a living, and the other was for those who was so society insignificant they had to beg just to survive. Reference Luke 16, verse 20. Jesus used the latter of these in the first beatitude. His term spirit in a reference to the inner self or the soul, in contrast to the outer self, body. That means that Jesus wants us to look on the inside and see ourselves as someone who does nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant. By taking the form of a servant to others, reference Philippians 2, verses 3 through 7. To be among the blessed, we must be a blessing, and that's what it means to be humble or poor in spirit.
I really like that last part. Thank you, Scott. We must be a blessing, and that to be among the blessed, we must be a blessing, and that's what it means to be humble and poor in spirit. So that speaks to us making a difference in people's lives. Will you serve people much if you consider people to be low or lower than you? A lot of times you won't. You will not serve them in the same way and in the same capacity as the Lord talks about, like washing the disciples' feet and the example that he gave there, unless we see people, through the eyes of love and equality. If we look lower at people because of their skin or because of their education or the lack thereof or because of any reason whatsoever, we're not going to serve them in that same capacity that the Lord teaches us to. And so I think that's what he's basically saying, that the latter part, the definition there, talking about basically not having anything. Any comments about that? About that first part? You are an active bunch this morning. All right, Henry, number 2 there, if you would.
For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The New Testament kingdom concept has 3 components. First, the word kingdom is used for those who want the will of God to be done because they want to be right with God. Matthew 6:10-33. Second, the word kingdom is used as a synonym for heaven. Matthew 7:21-23, 8:11. Third, the word kingdom is used as a synonym for the church. Matthew 16:18-19. Hebrews 12:23 and 28, New King James Version. Put together, the kingdom of God consists of those who belong to his church and have the hope of heaven because they want to be right with God by doing what he wants them to. To be among the special demographic, we must be humble.
All right, thank you very much. And so sometimes people will split hairs about what he means by kingdom here, and so I really like what Dan did, because really all 3 different definitions that you look at for kingdom, it's all good. No matter what the context, every single one of them means good. So whether you're talking about being right with God, or you're talking about being in the Lord's church, or you're talking about heaven, it's going to be one of those 3 or all 3. And so that's what we want to be right with God. We want to be in the Lord's church, right? And we want to go to heaven. And to be that way, you have to be humble, is what he's saying there. And so we must strive to be humble. Any comments about that paragraph? All right, look at the what do you think? Let me just ask y'all, and this is the first one, so I'm trying to get a feel for it of how much we want to look at the book and not. Do y'all like doing a lot of the questions and answering them publicly, or is that something you'd rather do mostly yourselves and not go over? Anybody? Yeah. I like the easy ones. Oh, did you? Well, this is 1B, Hilda. You got your 1A and you got your 1B. What do y'all think about the questions? My opinion is I enjoy going over them because it gets the wheels turning, hopefully encouraging us to take these home during the week and look over them and be thinking about those things. And it encourages thought, for people to express what they think about things and not just the teacher. So I like them. So if you don't like it, let me know, and maybe we'll skip some of them, Ronnie.
It's kind of like not just being, filling the questions out, but these are mostly scriptures
Yeah.
here.
Well, the first part is, but
Yeah.
there's some think harder questions a little bit later where
Think
we're going to
harder
be.
Questions makes me just fail.
Do what now?
It makes me feel like a failure.
All right, well, let's do it then.
I like to hear other people's opinions.
We
Amen.
want to make Ronnie feel like a failure.
Thank you very much. I didn't need that. I already did.
All right, well, the first part, what do you think? Proverbs 3:34, to the blank, God gives blank.
Humble, he gives grace.
Humble and grace, or favor, either one. Proverbs 11 and verse 2, when blank comes, then comes blank.
Pride and shame.
All right, pride and shame or disgrace could be that second one. James 4 and verse 10, blank yourselves before the Lord and he will blank you.
Humble yourselves in the sight of God, and He will raise you up.
Ooh, we're going to have to do this in a more organized fashion.
In which,
We can't go against 1 Corinthians 14
Where?
and do this in a chaotic way. All this has got to be done decent and in order. We can't be talking over each other now.
where are you?
I don't know, Henry. I'm all over the place.
Oh, you're on.
I'm on what do you think?
I see it now.
So James 4 and verse 10, you both were correct, I believe. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will exalt you. 1 Peter 5 and verse 5, God blank the proud, but gives blank to the humble. God resists or opposes either one, the proud, but gives grace to the humble, depending obviously on your translation. All right, very good. Page, well, it's probably different. I've got a different book than you. But anyway, the material after that, Jesus was humble or poor in spirit. So looking at the example of Jesus, not going to look at every paragraph here, but it gives three different examples of Jesus being humble and poor in spirit. Number one, Matthew 20:28, Jesus saw himself as a what?
Servant.
As a servant. Saw himself as a servant. Do I see myself as a servant? As a Christian, I should. Number two, in Acts 10 and verse 38, Acts 10 and verse 38, Jesus used his miraculous abilities as a servant. Yes. Isn't that something? If you had the ability and the power to do anything you wanted to do, what would you do with it? Serve somebody? Probably most of us would not, honestly. We would serve ourselves. If you had the power to say the words and it is right there, anything that you wanted to have, anything that you wanted to do, we would be like, woo-woo, I want $1 billion. I would say I want a Canyon truck, a brand new one. Cody's got a beautiful Canyon truck. I would say I want a brand new Corvette. I'm a vet guy. I like trucks too, though. But my point is, probably every one of us, the very first thing that would come to our mind if the genie was there was self. And to a certain point, that's okay. It's all right, to spoil yourself maybe a little bit. But Jesus, all throughout his teachings and all throughout the Holy Spirit's teachings throughout the New Testament, is trying to drill in our head that it's not about me, it's about others. It's about others. Scott?
One of the things that I learned in the Navy was one thing they really impressed on us: when you're in a leadership position, you're a servant. You are to serve those under you, and that the best leaders you've ever been around in your life, whether it be at work, military, wherever,
Or
the
servant.
ones that it's not for their gain, it's for the ones under them's gain. When they're in the leadership position, but they're there to serve. And Jesus, by example, shows that. If you're going to lead someone, you're going to have to serve them. If you're going to lead a lot, you're going to have to serve a lot. So leadership is servantry. And
Yep.
that's very, very important. It's not, I'm way up here, you're down here, I'm going to do everything for my gain to even get higher. You're to take care of those people below you.
Right.
So that leadership is really very humbling when you're in a
Let the
leadership
greatest among you be
The least.
Least.
position. The least.
The least, right. So Scott is saying, you know, that we look up to, maybe idolize even sometimes, that we are inspired by those in different fields that do that don't have to do that. One that I am is in surveying. The guy, Pewright, or not Pewright, that's a different place, but Donovan Engineering that I work for some, Barry Donovan, he is a civil engineer in land surveying, and he designs sewers and stuff and subdivisions, and so in order to do that, you have to get the existing flow lines of manholes and all that good and clean work, right? And so even this past week, this past Monday, I was having to do that, and these manholes had been abandoned and lost in the woods. I had to chop my way to them, dig down about a half a foot, pick them up with a locator, find them with a locator, dig down about a half a foot, completely uncover them, pop the lid, and then get the inverts. Now, it's a nasty job. I mean, I was soaked from head to toe. It's just a nasty job. It's something a civil engineer has to have that information in order to do his design work. My point is, he can tell me, I'm not a civil engineer, or anybody else to go do that work. No, he comes out there, and he did Monday. He comes out there, and he will help you in every aspect. I've had him get down in storm manholes, not in sanitary sewer, but in storm manhole boxes, for him to go down and make measurements and stuff, being the civil engineer. And that, you know, at first I'm like, man, I don't want to go down in there. I mean, he don't pay me enough for that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, he's before I turn around, he's down in the hole making measurements. And then I feel about like this, you know, because I'm not the civil engineer. And so he's led by example, and therefore I want to be a little bit more like that. You think about, I was talking about genie in the bottle, you know, if you had anything, would you do for yourself or for somebody else? And you might be thinking, well, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, because I obviously don't have that. Don't we? Don't we? We don't have a genie in the bottle, but don't we all have resources?
We have the ability.
So the question is, do I spend all of my resources on self, or do I use a lot of them to bless other people? And so we do have that opportunity. But today we've got, was that the first or second?
First.
Second?
Oh, it is.
One last thing. Today you have the opportunity, each and every one of us do, to make a difference in these flood victims. And so there's a special contribution taken up. If you're anything like me, a lot of times I'm like, man, that hit at a bad time. Well, I'm sure they didn't pick and choose when they were going to have their homes, you know, washed away and everything. Right. But if we're humble, we want to say, you know what I can give, I'll give. And so let's give. Let's give as we can. As we have opportunity, let us do good to